David, no.
Daddy, no.
David! Get back in the car!
Some horror movies scare you in the moment and fade away once the credits roll. But in 2007, The Mist went further. It didn't just frighten audiences, it emotionally devastated them. Frank Darabont's adaptation of Stephen King's novel delivered an ending so cruel and controversial that fans still argue about it nearly 2 decades later. Even Stephen King himself admitted the finale shocked him in the best possible way. But the darkness surrounding The Mist didn't stop at the screen. Behind the scenes, creative risks, psychological performances, and unsettling production choices pushed this film into genuinely disturbing territory. Today, on Iconic TV Rewind, we will examine 21 shocking secrets you never knew.
Come on!
Fact number 1. The ending Stephen King never saw coming. When Frank Darabont adapted Stephen King's novella, he knew the original ambiguous ending wouldn't deliver the emotional impact he wanted on screen. In the book, the character's fate remains unresolved, lingering in uncertainty. Darabont believed that ambiguity worked on the page, but cinema demanded something more permanent, more devastating, and more emotionally confrontational. During development, several alternate ending approaches were explored, including softer variations that might have offered relief or hope. Studios were understandably cautious about sending audiences home emotionally wrecked, but Darabont rejected every safer option, convinced that retreating from the story's darkness would undermine its entire message about fear, desperation, and irreversible choice. What surprised nearly everyone afterward was Stephen King's reaction. Rather than criticizing the change, King publicly praised the ending and admitted that he wished he had thought of it himself. That endorsement validated Darabont's creative gamble, even though the ending polarized audiences and likely limited the film's commercial appeal. The result is a finale that continues to haunt viewers long after the credits fade. Fact number 2, the cast didn't know how it really ended. To preserve secrecy and prevent emotional preconditioning, many of the cast members were intentionally kept unaware of exactly how the story would conclude. Rather than explaining every narrative detail in advance, the production allowed uncertainty to remain part of the working environment. Several performers only experienced the full emotional weight of the ending when they watched the completed film for the first time. This approach kept performances raw and unpredictable. Without knowing whether the story would ultimately offer hope or collapse into tragedy, actors responded to scenes with genuine tension rather than calculated emotion. In a strange way, the performers were living inside a controlled version of the same uncertainty their characters faced, making their fear and desperation feel more authentic on screen. Fact number 3, the movie stripped away almost all the music. Most horror films rely heavily on musical cues to tell the audience when fear's coming or when it's safe to breathe again. The Mist intentionally removes that safety net. Frank Darabont wanted the terror to feel raw, exposed, and unsettlingly realistic, more like witnessing a disaster than watching a stylized movie. Large sections of the film play with little or no musical score at all, allowing silence, distant screams, and environmental noise to dominate the soundscape. Without emotional guidance from music, tension never fully releases. When music does appear, it's emotionally overwhelming rather than comforting. The haunting track, Host of Seraphim, functions more like a funeral hymn, reinforcing despair instead of excitement. The restraint makes the film feel colder, harsher, and far more psychologically invasive than a traditional horror soundtrack. Fact number 4. Darabont knew the ending could kill the movie. Frank Darabont fully understood that delivering such a merciless ending could alienate mainstream audiences and potentially hurt the film's box office performance. Studios typically favor conclusions that leave viewers energized or emotionally satisfied, not shaken and disturbed. But Darabont believed compromising the ending for comfort would betray the story's emotional truth. Rather than chasing broad approval, he committed to telling the version of the story that felt honest, even if it divided audiences and limited short-term commercial success. That creative gamble ultimately strengthened the film's legacy. While The Mist was never a blockbuster, its ending became one of the most debated and unforgettable finales in modern horror, proving that controversy often fuels longevity more than safe storytelling ever could. Fact number 5, the real monsters were always human. Although The Mist features terrifying creatures, Darabont has consistently emphasized that the true horror lies in human behavior under pressure. Inside the grocery store, fear spreads faster than the monsters outside. Rational thinking collapses, trust evaporates, and people begin turning on one another in the desperate search for certainty and control. Mrs. Carmody's rise as a religious extremist reflects a disturbingly familiar pattern seen throughout history: frightened populations gravitating toward absolute answers when logic fails. That psychological tension wasn't limited to the screen. During filming, the crowded hysteria scenes reportedly generated a surprisingly intense atmosphere on set, with performers feeding off the escalating emotional energy in ways that sometimes felt uncomfortably real. By anchoring the horror in recognizable human behavior rather than pure fantasy, the film transforms fear into something deeply personal. The monsters may lurk in the fog, but the most dangerous transformations happen in plain sight. Fact number 6. How real extremists shaped Mrs. Carmody. To bring Mrs. Carmody to life, Marcia Gay Harden avoided turning the character into a cartoon villain or exaggerated lunatic. Instead, she studied real-world religious extremism and cult psychology to ground the performance in believable behavior rather than theatrical madness. That research influenced everything from her vocal rhythm to the way she physically positioned herself within crowds, slowly asserting authority as fear escalated. Harden has explained that the character's danger comes from sincere conviction rather than malice. Mrs. Carmody genuinely believes she is doing moral good, which mirrors how real extremist leaders justify manipulation and cruelty in the name of higher purpose. That authenticity makes the character deeply unsettling, because audiences recognize the behavior patterns from real history rather than fantasy. By anchoring the performance in reality, Harden helped transform Mrs. Carmody into one of the film's most disturbing forces, not because she possesses supernatural power, but because her influence feels disturbingly plausible. Fact number 7. The scene that shook everyone on set. One of the most emotionally devastating moments in the film belongs to Melissa McBride, who later became widely known for her role on The Walking Dead. Her character's desperate plea to return home to her children before meeting a brutal fate struck an emotional nerve that surprised even the crew during filming. Several people involved with the production have recalled the set falling unusually quiet afterward, with cast and crew visibly shaken by the rawness of her performance. The scene didn't feel like typical genre acting or manufactured fear. It felt painfully real, tapping into parental anxiety and helplessness in a way that lingered long after the camera stopped rolling. That emotional authenticity is why the moment remains one of the film's most haunting sequences. It isn't just another monster kill, it feels like witnessing genuine human tragedy unfold in real time. Fact number 8. The moment that terrified the child actor. Because of the film's extreme subject matter, young actor Nathan Gamble's parents carefully limited what material he was exposed to during production. He was primarily allowed to read and participate only in scenes directly involving his character, helping shield him from the darker aspects of the story. However, Gamble later recalled being genuinely frightened when he unexpectedly encountered another actor covered in realistic burn makeup during filming. At the time, he didn't yet fully understand how special effects worked, so the sight felt disturbingly real. The moment stuck with him as a reminder of how convincing movie magic can be, especially when viewed through a child's perspective. Even with precautions in place, the intensity of practical effects occasionally blurred the line between performance and reality, highlighting the strange emotional risks that can emerge on film sets. Fact number 9. The version of the movie you probably haven't seen. Although most audiences originally saw The Mist in color, Frank Darabont has said that he always envisioned the film in black and white. He felt removing color made the world feel harsher, more timeless, and more reminiscent of classic monster movies that influenced Stephen King's early imagination. When the monochrome version was eventually released, many fans found that the fog, shadows, and creature silhouettes became more oppressive and surreal. Without color to soften the imagery, the environment feels colder and more unforgiving, amplifying the film's bleak atmosphere. For Darabont, the black and white cut wasn't a novelty. It was closer to the emotional experience he originally intended. Fact number 10. The fog was actually real on set. The fog in The Mist wasn't simply added digitally after filming. The production developed ways to physically manipulate real mist on set so actors could genuinely move through it, disappear into it, and react to its unpredictable behavior. Temperature and airflow were carefully managed to guide the fog exactly where the cameras needed it. This practical approach made the environment feel immersive and disorienting for performers. Instead of acting against empty space, they were surrounded by shifting fog that limited visibility and distorted depth perception, helping reinforce the characters' confusion and isolation. The unpredictable movement of the mist added an organic realism that digital effects alone would have struggled to replicate. Fact number 11, the set was freezing during filming on purpose. Maintaining consistent fog on a soundstage is far more complicated than simply turning on a machine. To properly control the density and movement of the mist, the stage temperature had to remain relatively cold throughout filming. This helped stabilize how the fog behaved under the lights and prevented it from dissipating too quickly. The downside was physical discomfort. Long shooting days took place in chilly conditions while actors worked under hot lighting rigs and heavy wardrobe layers. The damp, cold environment gradually contributed to fatigue and tension, which unintentionally mirrored the exhaustion and claustrophobia seen on screen. While the discomfort wasn't designed as a performance tool, it subtly reinforced the oppressive atmosphere the film needed. Fact number 12, the camera style that made everything feel unsafe. Rather than aiming for polished studio visuals, Frank Darabont wanted the mist to feel like raw footage captured during a real crisis. Handheld cameras, imperfect framing, and slightly unstable movement were used to create the sensation that events were unfolding spontaneously rather than being carefully staged. This approach keeps the audience slightly off balance at all times. The camera never feels fully settled, reinforcing the idea that safety has vanished from the environment. Even quiet scenes carry underlying tension because the visual language signals unpredictability. The result is a more immersive experience that feels closer to documentary realism than traditional horror cinematography. Fact number 13, the creatures were designed to feel real. The monsters in the pharmacy sequence weren't meant to feel like fantasy creatures pulled from mythology. The design team wanted them to feel disturbingly plausible, as if they could exist somewhere in nature under unfamiliar conditions. Their movement, feeding behavior, and cocooning patterns followed real-world predatory logic rather than supernatural chaos. This biological grounding makes the horror more invasive. Instead of simply fearing what the creatures might do next, the audience feels unsettled by how convincingly they behave like living organisms operating on instinct. The realism taps into a primal discomfort that lingers longer than surface-level jump scares. Fact number 14. Actors were literally trapped in the cocoons. Many of the cocoon victims seen in the pharmacy sequence were created using practical effects rather than fully digital imagery. Actors were wrapped in layered materials designed to simulate organic webbing and biological residue, which physically restricted movement and visibility during filming. While the process wasn't dangerous, it was uncomfortable enough to create genuine physical tension for the performers. That discomfort translated directly into the suffocating visual texture on screen, helping the sequence feel tangible rather than artificial. The tactile quality of the effects reinforces the sense that these creatures don't simply kill, they consume and transform. Fact number 15. The tentacle scene was way more complicated than it looks. The loading dock tentacle sequence required an intricate mix of physical rigs and visual effects. Certain portions of the tentacles were physically present on set for lighting reference and interaction, while much of the movement and scale were finalized digitally in post-production. Early attempts to rely more heavily on practical effects proved too slow and restrictive for the dynamic action the scene required. Digital augmentation allowed the filmmakers to achieve fluid motion, believable weight, and precise choreography without putting performers at unnecessary risk. The final sequence feels massive and chaotic while remaining carefully controlled behind the scenes. Fact number 16, the monster so big it didn't notice humans. One of the film's most haunting images occurs near the end when an enormous creature silently passes over the character's vehicle. Unlike the aggressive monsters seen earlier, this being doesn't acknowledge the humans below it at all. The design intentionally communicates cosmic insignificance, the idea that humanity is no longer the dominant presence in this world, merely an unnoticed detail in a much larger ecosystem. its scale suggests that the creatures already encountered may only represent a fraction of what exists beyond the fog, expanding the horror from survival into existential dread. Fact number 17. The disaster may have been man-made. In Stephen King's original novella, the cause of the mist remains intentionally vague. The film version expands that ambiguity by tying the catastrophe to a military experiment known as the Arrowhead Project, suggesting that a dimensional breach may have unleashed the creatures. This subtle shift introduces human accountability into the disaster. Rather than pure cosmic accident, the horror carries the implication of institutional secrecy and unchecked experimentation. The explanation remains incomplete on purpose, preserving mystery while grounding the event in believable human error. Fact number 18. The deleted opening you never got to see. Early development included concepts that would have shown more of the Arrowhead Project directly, potentially depicting the experiment that caused the breach. Those ideas ultimately stayed on the page and were never filmed. Darabont chose to avoid over-explaining the origin of the disaster, believing that mystery keeps fear alive longer than technical clarity. By leaving the cause partially unseen, the film allows the audience's imagination to fill in the worst possibilities rather than relying on explicit exposition. Fact number 19. The hidden Stephen King universe Easter egg. Sharp-eyed Stephen King fans may notice a subtle connection to King's larger fictional universe early in the film. One of David Drayton's paintings resembles imagery associated with the Dark Tower series, quietly hinting that the story may exist within King's broader multiverse. It's a blink-and-you-miss-it detail that rewards attentive viewers without distracting casual audiences, reinforcing the interconnected mythology that runs through much of King's work. Fact number 20. Stephen King almost appeared in this movie. Although Stephen King does not appear on screen in The Mist, he was offered a small role during development. King ultimately declined, largely because the filming location required travel he wasn't interested in committing to at the time. It's a rare near-miss cameo that many fans assume happened, but never did. While King has appeared in several film adaptations of his work, The Mist remains one of the notable projects where he chose not to step in front of the camera. Fact number 21. How a modest horror film became a cult legend. While the film was not a massive box office juggernaut during its theatrical run, it steadily gained a devoted following through home video, streaming, and word of mouth. Its uncompromising ending, grounded performances, and bleak worldview helped it stand apart from more conventional horror releases. Today, The Mist is frequently referenced as a benchmark for emotionally fearless storytelling, a film that sacrificed comfort for impact and secured a lasting place in horror history. If you enjoyed diving into the darker side of The Mist, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more disturbing behind-the-scenes stories from horror's most unforgettable films. And let me know in the comments which movie you'd like to see covered next.